To sound even more unnatural, I'm going to speak in English as well, even with my thick accent from Tuscany. So what I'm going to talk about today is food, nature, and art. But especially if you think about nature, you have just a very small topic that we call assignment for today. What I wanted to start from, however, is art. Of course, we have already heard a lot of things about it today. I'm not going to say more about it. I think, at least with respect to the general issues that pertain to food and art, we can wonder whether food is art and whether food is rather, should be considered a craft more than an art. We should wonder whether food have some kind of meaning or convey some form of knowledge that is comparable at all to the knowledge that we gather from a painting or from a movie or from a book or from even perhaps a musical piece. And some authors, like Elizabeth Terfer, have suggested that, for example, food might be art, but it should be a minor art because it has some conditions, like the persistence through time, that makes it different or less prone to be regarded as a work of art. What I'm going to suggest today, what I'm going to talk about today, is actually the ways in which our conceptions of nature have helped or are helping in thinking of how to make food a form of art. Okay? There is a lot of work being done right now on this topic, and of course I want to be able to talk about all of it. The first thing we should reflect, I think, is also what is nature, right? In the same way that Nicola this morning started his speech by running through a list of entries that were coming out from a Google search on food as art or Cibo e arte. We can wonder, first of all, what is nature? So the Latin root, the term comes from Latin, which means to generate. And we can distinguish a number of significant meanings in which the term nature is used. Here are 5 of them, actually, 5 of them that I regard as most important. The first way in which we use nature is that nature is everything, right? So God is nature, as Spinoza, one philosopher from 1600, used to say, and as we find in many religious myths. The second one is that nature is anything that falls under the subject of study of natural sciences. I think some of the people that spoke before me today actually alluded that this type of interpretation of what nature is. If something is biological or is physiological or is ecological, then it's somehow natural. We're invoking something natural. Of course, that's not the only other way in which we use the term nature. Another very important conception of nature, especially in gastronomy, contemporary gastronomy, is nature as that which is untamed or wild. We have a lot of discussion about wild foods, from hunting to gathering of foods. And so certainly the third one, nature as untamed, is another main conception of nature that we have when we talk about food. When it comes to this, you can have, already you can think that sometimes we may be a little confused, or we may tend to use nature as wild because we are invoking the brutality of nature, or nature as wild because we are evoking instead some pastoral imagery. The fourth meaning or big category in which we understand nature is that which is not artificial, not greatly artificial. And of course here we can discuss degrees of artificiality. So of course the artificiality, for example, of a golden delicious apple that has to have been grafted from a very specific apple tree that was discovered about a century ago might be different from the artificiality of a meat cut like ossobuco. That both of those entities, you could take an apple and an ossobuco, might have something that you might want to consider natural, but on the other hand, you might want to also regard as consider that there is something artificial there. And this might be even different from, say, vanilla flavor that contains or has only the chemical structure of vanilla as extracted from a plant, but it is still called natural on a packaged food. because it has that chemical structure. Okay? So we can think of that which is natural as opposed to something that is artificial, distinguishing these different degrees of artificiality. The last I think, meaning I'd like to stress of what is natural is in reference to authentic, because I think authenticity, as we heard already also from the relations of Carola, Tiziana, and Bob. You know, when we're talking about recipes, sometimes you might think there is a way of rendering a recipe that is more natural than another, perhaps alluding to the fact that it might be more authentic. And certainly we speak of people as being natural or unnatural in their behavior, and perhaps of making a natural use of a certain item within a recipe. So you can think of the use of natural as something that is true to itself in a given context, so some kind of authenticity. The next piece that I'd like to bring in is that eating is an agricultural act, as Wendell Berry famously wrote in his piece, The Pleasures of Eating. More specifically, or more comprehensively, what one could say is that eating is actually an ecological act, right? Not everything that we eat, of course, is a product of agriculture. There are things that we eat that haven't been cultivated, but at the same time, everything that we eat is the product of what you can consider a certain ecological relationship that you have with some other organisms that surround you. Cultivation, of course, is the paradigm of culture, and culture, the term, derives from cultivation, right? They share the same root. And in this sense, you can think that eating is both natural and cultural. And I don't see, of course, an opposition between natural and culture in this. Right? There is a certain sense of thinking of eating as an act that is natural, but also as an act that, of course, is cultural. The two of them go together. So one way, or the direction in which I've been thinking of the pleasure from eating recently is that the pleasure of the palate is part of our ecological niche. And you can think of this, if then you want to go more in depth, you can think of this as the niche of a Homo sapiens, of me qua Homo sapiens. Or I could think of this as the pleasure of the palate as part of my niche as a male, or as part of maybe an Italian migrant in the US, and so on and so forth. The type of, I think, approach we should take to the idea of nature when we think about it is something that has been suggested to me also recently by this author Jennifer Price, that suggests that we should stop thinking of the earth or nature as something that has to be saved, as an independent entity, the poor thing we have to save by our maybe act of eating, or by the way in which we transport ourselves around the world. But actually we are making the earth, right? By eating, we are making our ecological niche. So the idea is not that there is this thing that is nature, and then when you eat nature. The idea is that you are making nature as you are deciding to create a certain ecological relationship. Okay? Perhaps you might want to think of this as a passive or an active conception of your conception of nature. Now, to add another piece to the discourse, I think we should distinguish at least 5 aesthetic dimensions of a dish. Okay? The first aesthetic dimension is, you can think, the concept that is behind a dish. The concept that is behind the dish. The second one are perhaps the skills that are required or that are displayed in the dish. Okay? The third one could be a gustatory experience, so what happens when you are experiencing the dish. The fourth one that might still surround your experience, of course, is the branding. But the fifth one, that is the one that I'm concentrating on, and I'd like to concentrate on today, is the agricultural ecological act, or the agricultural ecological component, that there is part of the aesthetic dimension of you eating a dish. There are different ways in which the agricultural or ecological component influence our experience, aesthetic experience of food. The first one, very typical, is what I would call the beautification of landscape. So if you take, this picture is from an area, a town, Panzano in Chianti, and it's a valley called the Concadoro Valley. It's called Concadoro because until maybe 25 years ago, it was golden over the summer because they were raising grain in this area. Right now, as you can see from the picture, there are olive trees and vineyards. And of course, the landscape has been beautified, you can think, in order for the people that sell the products that come from the area to have products that are represented by the landscape. Okay, so the landscape becomes something that is part also of the aesthetic dimension of the wine you are drinking, or the olive oil you are tasting, or even the meat you are having, because you are associating that wine, that olive oil with this landscape. And you are not associating that with the fields of grain. Okay? So, if you think about the ways in which the landscape has been transformed over the past few decades, just in Italy or in different parts of the world, in order to accommodate a certain aesthetic dimension, this is one of its examples. There are, of course, many other ways in which we come up with narratives of origins or the narratives of relationship to the food we are experiencing that attempt to modify our aesthetic experience and appreciation of the food. For example, the foraging or tending narratives. So you can think, if you go to eat at Noma's restaurant, right, in Copenhagen, the fact that the food has been foraged, most of the food has been foraged, and it's a pity that today Daniel Patterson is not with us, because he's another, of course, promoter of this type of narratives. The fact that the food has been foraged is a very important aesthetic dimension of the food you are having. Here, incidentally, we find also an example that is important of how gastronomy may function as an aid to natural science. I think in what the Nordic Food Lab is doing in Copenhagen is also really important also to people working in the natural sciences at the place. And for those interested in the relationship between gastronomy and other sciences, and often we may tend to think that gastronomy is the ultimate part of the chain. So gastronomers learn from biologists, but they can't teach anything to biologists or natural scientists. I think here you might actually have examples that go in the other direction. Of course, there are other examples coming from chemistry, but this is a good one. Another type of narrative is the one of geographic indications. So geographic indications also here, right here in Piedmont, in Tuscany, we have geographic indications that are associated, that elicit certain types of narratives with respect to the terroir, to the land. But of course, geographic indications nowadays, a lot of the produces that we eat are maybe owned by, the companies are owned by foreigners, and the workers are not from the territory. Right? Here in the Italian land, for example, most of the people that tend the vineyards, or a large part, does not even speak Italian as a first language. And the same goes for many other of the products that we eat. The third type of idea of nature that is involved in the aesthetic appreciation of food is the exotic, right? The exoticism. So all sorts of images or associations to exotic foods are, here in Italy we don't have that as a very strong component, I think, of our aesthetic experience, not yet. Especially in the United States, for example, this is very, very strong. Right? The exoticism with respect to the food that we are eating and the sort of imageries that the restaurant is evoking is a very important component of the aesthetic dimension of the food. Another one is the ways in which taxonomies have been adjusted. So we may adjust sometimes species or races or varieties in order to accommodate our aesthetic preferences. So we may introduce something like razza bovina piemontese in order to have a narrative that allows us to appreciate a certain aesthetic dimension of the food we are eating. Oops. And another one is an evolutionary narrative. There are many people, perhaps also here, that maybe are fruitarians, or they enjoy the caveman diet or the blood diet, and so on and so forth. So these are all ways in which food narratives can aid, food narratives related to nature can modify the way in which we appreciate a certain food. So in order to exemplify then the relationship between nature and art, I'd like to show you just two very short videos from this British artist, Andy Goldsworthy. And Sebastian, I think, has the videos ready. So this is from Rivers and Tides, which is a 2001 movie on the work of Andy Goldsworthy. And I chose this because it doesn't talk about food, but to me it does, in a sense, talk about food vicariously, because the idea here of what Goldsworthy is doing, all of his work, is taking natural elements and transforming them. So what I'd like to suggest in the end is that eating is a practice of transforming other organisms. And of course, not all transformations are on a par. We don't want to consider all transformations as works of art, right? And the aesthetic relevance of the ecological reflection of food should be the part of the component of when is it that something is art. So we can wonder whether we can tell the boundaries between arts and crafts by means of a type of epistemic engagement, or by means of a type of activity, or the duration or the purpose of the work. But I doubt that could be a direction that would bring you anywhere, also with respect to the contemporary artistic landscape. As Nicola suggested this morning, right, l'idea può stare dappertutto, so you can imagine that a dialogue, can you imagine that a dialogue between in any case, a dialogue with the ecological purposes of food may deliver, of course, some works of art. So what I leave you is just those questions, which is what keeps you going, what brings people together, what may transform, enlighten, stop, or uplift us. And I think by a reconsideration of the ways in which we have an ecological relationship with the food we eat, of course we can produce perhaps works of art that are similar to the ones of Andy Goldsworthy. I think, of course, I don't have the time here today. Many of the cooks that have been here or that are working nowadays are doing precisely this. They are retransforming our ecological relationship with food. And because of that, we recognize a really important aesthetic value to what they are doing, perhaps the value of art. Thank you.